Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the huge expose reported at the end of last week, which completely destroys, quite frankly, the notion that the British government is being led by the science in its coronavirus decision-making processes. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, up until the end of last week, we really knew that the government were not being led by the science, largely because the science that they were proclaiming was at odds with the general international consensus in most respects. The government were asked on a daily basis for details of the scientific research that suggested that somehow we knew better than the rest of the international scientific community. These questions were met with deafening silence every single time. In addition, these scientific advisors and their discussions were being kept secret. This is not normal procedure. In the UK, our scientific advice comes from a committee called SAGE, Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, which, as a little aside, is an example of one thing we do get right in this country. We know how to do acronyms, SAGE for our science panel, and none of this VLA rubbish for our radio telescope arrays. No. Ours is called Merlin. How cool is that? Multi-element radio linked interferometer network. We do know how to come up with cool acronyms. We may not know much else these days, but we know that. But who is on the SAGE committee? The government will not tell us. We know some of the members because they've made themselves publicly known, but we should know the full membership so that their credentials for their particular area of expertise for this emergency can be checked. Minutes of the meetings are also being kept secret. Again, why? These are not intelligence committee meetings, they are science meetings. Well, now we know. It's because Dominic Cummings and one of his sidekicks from the Vote Leave Cambridge Analytica time are also on the panel. And although his mate is sort of a mathematician, though not one with any standing worthy of being in this group, Dominic Cummings is absolutely not. He respects science, fair enough, but he is not a scientist on any level, let alone the foremost authority in the country in any particular area of relevant expertise for this pandemic. That he is involved in these meetings at all as anything other than an observer is absolutely outrageous. And it has also shocked everyone who has ever had anything to do with a SAGE panel in the past. They cannot believe it, except I can. It actually made sense when I found out, because there had to be a reason why they were keeping the membership secret. Why would you do that? And it wasn't because of protecting the members from lobbying, as stated. They say, oh, we don't want to release their names because then people will lobby them. No. People in prominent positions like this, yes, they may have people approaching them. They're strong enough to be able to withstand that. If the average minister can do that, then I'm sure so can someone on this panel. There also had to be a reason why they were refusing to release the minutes of these meetings, which actually could have been easily anonymised if they were still going to go with their protecting members' identities nonsense. And also remember that, SAGE is nothing new. We've had these for a long time. Whenever there's been an emergency, a SAGE group has formed, and we've never had this secrecy in previous ones. And and this was it. It's not a scientific group now. That's now clear. It's not. There are scientists on it. There are scientists who deserve to be on it. But it's not a scientific group, because Dominic Cummings is actively involved. It's a political group masquerading as a scientific panel, so that when there's any blame to be had for the failings, as there already has been and there will continue to be, the government can keep saying that they have been following the science, and they can say that any missteps that may have occurred with hindsight were due to all this being new, as if viral pandemics are something new. And the crazy thing is that although Downing Street have confirmed that Dominic Cummings has attended the meeting, he's attended the meetings, but they deny that he's a member of SAGE, even though they're not trying to say that he's only there to observe things, which would be okay, that's fine, no problem there. But they say that he takes part in them, he asks questions, he supports others in the meeting. So he's taking part in them, which means he's a member of the meeting. That's because that's what All Sage is. It's a group that meets and discusses things and then presents advice to the government. That's all it does. Doesn't make decisions, doesn't do anything like that. It discusses the scientific aspect of the emergency and presents its findings to the government. So Dominic Cummings taking any part in them at all means he is a member of the group. You know, that is membership by definition. And what the government are basically saying is, no, Dominic Cummings wasn't in the car at all. He was just driving it. What? Really? And this completely and utterly blows away any notion of following the science. They are following a guy who studied history at university. Norman history. Because, of course, the Normans have lots to teach us about viral global pandemics. You know, this guy is involved in everything the government does. He has been deciding everything the government does. Remember, it was Dominic Cummings who pushed this herd immunity strategy. It was already believed that he was really in charge during Boris Johnson's absence through illness, not Dominic Raab. Frankly, it's believed by many that he's in charge even when Boris Johnson isn't away on holiday or recuperating at Chequers. Sage in the past has been completely independent of politics, with the small exception of the chief scientific advisor, who is a political appointment. But even then, they are still scientists. They still have to be an eminent scientist, but they are still expected to be at the top of a relevant scientific field. Every member of SAGE has to be at the top of that field that has something to do with the emergency at hand. That this committee would have members that have, frankly, fewer qualifications than me is ridiculous and frankly terrifying. And yet, how does the right-wing press behave with this outstanding revelation, this scandal? They don't report on it at all, and there's nothing on the headlines about it. You know, they're just talking about the different crazy ways they think the government might end the lockdown quite soon. The only reports you'll see in the newspapers are in the left-wing media. And yet there has been the odd voice of reason, even in the Conservative Party, saying, hang on a minute, this isn't right. You know, and where you would least expect it as well. It is a grim day indeed. A grim day when David Davis is making sense. This is the guy who was the first Brexit secretary, for those who don't know, and when he was about to go off to hold Brexit negotiation meetings years ago, tried to go to completely the wrong country. You know, he was going to go off to completely the wrong country. This guy now is somehow making sense. He said the whole point of having SAGE is to get the best advice based on the data. You don't want any outside influence, he said. Neither do you want its advice transmitted via filters that may not understand it, because that is what we're getting. Because the minutes of those meetings are not being published, it's going through the Downing Street filter. Civil servants who, as David Davis is noting there, do not have science qualifications. So even with the best of intentions, they don't understand necessarily what the committee is saying. These minutes need to be published so that other public health experts can look at those minutes and, you know, understand what the committee has actually been advising. So you've got two levels of problems. First of all, the committee has members who are not scientists. They're certainly not eminent scientists, but they're not scientists at all. Dominic Cummings is not a scientist. He appreciates scientists. He likes to surround himself with scientifically minded people. Fantastic. But he is not one. And yet he's taking a role. And quite frankly, it's obviously going to be a leading role in these committee meetings. That's just your first level of nonsense. Then your second level is whatever is being presented, any sensible points that are being brought up by the grown-ups at those meetings, the people who really understand it, is being filtered politically as well before it comes out to the general public. So the bottom line is we actually have no idea what the scientific advice for the government is. None at all. We do not know what those scientists are advising because we're not seeing the minutes of those meetings. So the next time you hear the government saying that it is being led by the science, remember whose science it is. It's a history graduate's idea of science. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.